The overseer, a tall and imposing figure with iridescent scales and piercing violet eyes, stands before a massive holographic display of Earth. Her second-in-command, a slender alien with translucent skin named Xyloth, approaches hesitantly. Overseer, our analysis shows that the humans have made remarkable advancements in the past century, Xyloth reports, his voice trembling slightly. Their technology, while primitive compared to ours, has allowed them to adapt to the harshest conditions on their planet. The Overseer's eyes narrow as she studies the data streaming across the screen. Images of humans surviving in the scorching deserts, scaling the highest mountains, and enduring the most brutal winters flash before her. She watches as they build cities in the midst of catastrophic earthquakes and hurricanes, always finding a way to rebuild and persevere. It is not just their technology, the Overseer muses, her voice cold and calculating. It is their spirit, their relentless determination to overcome any obstacle in their path. It is almost as if they thrive on adversity. Xyloth nods in agreement, his own research confirming the Overseer's observations. Their history is filled with tales of individuals and communities rising above seemingly insurmountable challenges. They have a term for it, the human spirit. The Overseer turns to face Xyloth, her expression a mix of fascination and concern. And that is precisely why they pose a threat to our way of life. We have spent millennia creating a perfect society, free from hardship and strife. But what happens when these resilient beings decide to venture beyond their world and into the stars? She gestures to the holographic display, zooming out to reveal the vast expanse of the galaxy. They will not stop at conquering their own planet. They will seek out new worlds, new challenges to overcome. And with each victory, they will grow stronger, more determined. Xyloth's eyes widen as he begins to understand the implications of the Overseer's words. You believe they could one day rival our own power? The Overseer nods grimly. I do not believe, Xyloth. I know. Unless we take action now, these Deathworlders could become the most formidable force in the galaxy. She begins to pace, her mind racing with possibilities. We must find a way to test them, to push them to their limits and beyond. We must discover what it takes to break the human spirit. Xyloth frowns, uncertain of the Overseer's plan. But how do we do that without revealing ourselves? We have always maintained a policy of non-interference with lesser species. The Overseer smiles, a chilling expression that sends shivers down Xyloth's spine. We do not need to reveal ourselves, Xyloth. We have the technology to manipulate their environment, to create challenges that will test their resilience like never before. She turns back to the holographic display, her eyes gleaming with anticipation. We will select a small group of humans, the best and brightest of their kind, and place them in a series of trials designed to break them physically, mentally, and emotionally. We will monitor their every move, analyze their every decision, and use that data to predict the future of their species. Xyloth nods slowly, beginning to understand the scope of the Overseer's plan. And if they succeed? If they prove to be as resilient as you fear? The Overseer's smile fades, replaced by a look of grim determination. Then we will have no choice but to take more drastic measures. One way or another, we will ensure that the human threat is neutralized before it can become a reality. As the two aliens continue to discuss their plans, the holographic display shifts to a live feed of Earth. The planet is oblivious to the machinations taking place light-years away, its inhabitants going about their daily lives, unaware of the trials that await them. The Overseer watches, her eyes fixed on the blue and green orb, a world that has captured her attention like no other. She knows that the fate of her own species may depend on the outcome of this experiment, and she is determined to see it through to the end. Zach and Lena find themselves standing on an alien landscape, the sky above them a swirling mix of purple and green hues. The ground beneath their feet is a strange, spongy material that seems to pulse with a life of its own. They look at each other, confusion and fear etched on their faces. Where are we? Lena asks, her voice trembling slightly. The last thing I remember is being in the lab, working on that strange artifact we found. Zack nods, his brow furrowed as he tries to make sense of their surroundings. I was in the middle of a training exercise when everything went black. I thought maybe it was just a power outage, but this. He gestures to the alien world around them. This is something else entirely. As they take in their new environment, they begin to notice the strange flora and fauna that surrounds them. The plants are unlike anything they have ever seen before, with twisted, gnarled branches and leaves that seem to shimmer and change color in the light. The animals are equally bizarre, with multiple eyes, extra limbs, and scales that glitter like precious gems. We need to find shelter, Zack says, his military training kicking in. We don't know what kind of dangers this place holds. Lena nods in agreement, her scientific mind already racing with possibilities. We should also try to find a source of water and food. Who knows how long we'll be here? They set off in search of shelter, their senses on high alert for any signs of danger. As they walk, they begin to notice strange patterns in the landscape, as if it had been intentionally designed rather than naturally formed. Look at this, Lena says, pointing to a series of interlocking hexagons that seem to be etched into the ground. This isn't natural. It's almost like some kind of language or code. Zack frowns, his instincts telling him that they are being watched. We need to be careful. I have a feeling we're not alone here. As if on cue, a strange, alien creature suddenly bursts out of the undergrowth, its razor-sharp teeth bared in a snarl. It is a beast unlike any they have ever seen before, with a body that seems to be made of living metal and eyes that glow with an otherworldly intelligence. Zack immediately springs into action, placing himself between the creature and Lena. He reaches for his weapon, only to realize that it is gone, along with the rest of his equipment. Stay behind me, he tells Lena, his voice steady despite the fear that grips his heart. I'll handle this. The creature lunges at Zack, its claws slashing through the air with lightning speed. Zack dodges the attack, rolling to the side and coming up in a defensive stance. He knows that he is outmatched in terms of strength and speed, but he refuses to back down. As the creature prepares to strike again, Lena's eyes widen with realization. Zack, look at its eyes, she shouts. It's not just a mindless beast. It's intelligent. Zack hesitates for a moment, unsure of what to do. The creature takes advantage of his momentary distraction and lunges forward, its claws slicing through the air towards his throat. But just as it seems that all is lost, Lena steps forward, her hand outstretched in a gesture of peace. We mean you no harm, she says, her voice calm and soothing. We are lost and in need of help. To Zack's amazement, the creature hesitates, its eyes flickering with something almost like understanding. It takes a step back, its claws retracting back into its body. Lena continues to speak to the creature, using a combination of gestures and simple words to convey their peaceful intentions. Slowly but surely, the creature begins to relax, its posture shifting from aggressive to curious. As Lena and the creature continue to communicate, Zack can only watch in amazement. He realizes that Lena's scientific mind and ability to think outside the box may be just as valuable as his own combat skills in this strange new world. Together, they continue their journey, the alien creature now serving as their guide through the treacherous landscape. They know that they have a long way to go before they can find a way back home, but they are determined to face whatever challenges this world throws at them. Little do they know that their every move is being watched by the Overseer and her team, who are already beginning to realize that they may have underestimated the resilience and adaptability of these two humans. The signals intensified, revealing glimpses of a civilization that defied conventional understanding. What began as a routine research mission was transforming into something far more profound, a potential bridge between two radically different forms of intelligent life. Vikram's hands trembled slightly as he worked to decode the incoming transmissions. Each layer of translation revealed more questions than answers. The communication wasn't just a message, it was almost like a living narrative, shifting and adapting with each moment of interpretation. The crew watched in a mixture of terror and fascination as holographic representations began to form around them. Fractal patterns of light and energy took shape, suggesting complex biological and technological systems that seemed to breathe and pulse with an inner life. "It's like they're trying to show us something," Arya whispered, her scientific mind racing to comprehend the impossible data streaming before them. The representations weren't static images, but dynamic, ever-changing landscapes of information that seemed to respond to the crew's collective attention. Suddenly, the ship's environmental systems began to react. Temperature fluctuations, subtle changes in atmospheric composition, everything seemed to be subtly influenced by the mysterious communication. It was as if the very fabric of their technological environment was being gently manipulated by an intelligence beyond their comprehension. The crew exchanged worried glances. This was far beyond any first contact scenario they had trained for. Their scientific protocols seemed woefully inadequate in the face of this extraordinary encounter. As the hours passed, the communication grew more intricate. Glimpses of an entire civilization emerged, not through traditional visual representations, but through complex data patterns that suggested a form of collective consciousness that was simultaneously technological and biological. Vikram discovered something extraordinary in the signal patterns. They weren't just receiving a message, they were participating in a form of communication that seemed to adapt and evolve in real time. Each crew member's emotional and intellectual response seemed to subtly influence the incoming transmission. Dr. Lin realized they were experiencing something truly revolutionary. This wasn't just a first contact scenario, it was potentially the most significant moment in human exploratory history. A civilization that could communicate through pure information, that could adapt and respond to consciousness itself. The ship continued its silent drift through space, its crew suspended between terror and unprecedented scientific excitement, completely unaware of how this encounter would ultimately challenge everything they understood about life, intelligence, and survival. Something fundamental changed in the moments that followed. The ship's systems began to pulse with an otherworldly rhythm, as if the very membrane between technological infrastructure and living intelligence had become permeable. Dr. Arya Lin noticed it first, a subtle vibration that seemed to originate not from the ship's mechanical systems, but from a deeper, more intricate source. The holographic displays around her began to shift, their pixels breaking apart and reforming in patterns that defied conventional understanding of data transmission. "Everyone stay calm," she called out, though her own voice trembled slightly. The words seemed almost futile. Calm was no longer an option when reality itself appeared to be unraveling around them. Vikram's monitoring station erupted in a cascade of light and sound. Quantum sensors designed to detect the most minute variations in spacetime began to go haywire. It wasn't just reading anomalies, it was experiencing them. The very instruments meant to observe were now becoming part of the observation. "The energy signature is integrating," Vikram muttered, his fingers moving frantically across interfaces that seemed to be breathing and changing with each touch. "It's not just communicating. It's adapting." The crew watched in a mixture of horror and fascination as their technological environment began to transform. Walls that were once solid metal now seemed to ripple with an inner light, transparent and opaque simultaneously. Surfaces began to display complex geometric patterns that seemed to move with a kind of biological intelligence. What they didn't realize was that they were experiencing a form of communication far beyond human comprehension. This wasn't just an exchange of information, it was a complete recalibration of perception itself. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the team's xenobiologist, made a breakthrough that would later be considered one of the most significant scientific discoveries in human history. The transmission wasn't just a message, it was a form of existential integration. "It's trying to understand us," she whispered, her scientific mind racing to comprehend the impossible. "Not just our language or our technology. Our entire existential framework." The ship's life support systems began to respond in ways that defied all known scientific principles. Oxygen levels adjusted with a precision that suggested a living intelligence was actively managing their environment. Temperature fluctuations became smooth, almost gentle, as if something was carefully maintaining their physiological balance. Vikram discovered something extraordinary in the data streams. The communication was recursive, each moment of interaction was simultaneously creating and receiving information. It was less like a dialogue and more like a living, breathing ecosystem of knowledge. "We're not just receiving information," he called out, his voice a mixture of excitement and terror. "We're being analyzed. Understood." The crew watched as holographic representations began to form around them. But these weren't static images. They were dynamic, living constructs that seemed to breathe and pulse with an inner life. Fractals of light and energy took shape, suggesting complex biological and technological systems that defied traditional understanding. Dr. Lin realized they were witnessing something beyond first contact. This was a fundamental reimagining of what intelligence could be. The boundary between technological system and living organism was becoming impossibly thin. A sudden realization struck her. They weren't just encountering an alien civilization. They were experiencing a form of intelligence so advanced that the very concept of alien became meaningless. The ship continued to drift, but it was no longer just a vessel. It had become a living interface, a membrane through which two fundamentally different forms of existence were beginning to communicate, understand, and potentially transform each other. None of the crew knew what would happen next. But they all understood, with a clarity that went beyond words, that nothing would ever be the same again. Time began to lose its conventional meaning. The crew discovered that perception itself had become a malleable substance. What once felt like minutes could stretch into what seemed like hours, or compress into fleeting moments of extraordinary intensity. Dr. Lin realized they were experiencing a form of temporal manipulation that went beyond anything human science had ever conceptualized. Dr. Rodriguez approached the central holographic interface, her hand hovering just inches from its pulsing surface. The moment her fingers came close, the entire display erupted into a complex neural network of light and information. It was as if the communication system was reading her thoughts, anticipating her movements before she even completed them. "It's creating a cognitive map," she called out, her voice a mixture of scientific excitement and profound uncertainty. "Not just of our technology, but of our collective consciousness." Vikram's monitoring systems began to display something unprecedented. The energy signatures they were receiving weren't just signals, they were complex, adaptive patterns that seemed to be learning and evolving with each passing moment. It was like watching an intelligent organism grow and develop in real time, right before their eyes. The ship's internal environment continued to transform. Walls that were once rigid metal now seemed to breathe with a subtle, almost organic flexibility. Surfaces shifted between transparency and solid matter, creating impossible geometries that challenged everything the crew understood about physical space. Dr. Lin noticed something extraordinary happening to the crew. Their physiological responses were synchronizing in ways that defied medical understanding. Heart rates, brain wave patterns, even subtle muscular tensions began to align, not through any external control, but through some form of collective resonance. "We're being integrated," she whispered, more to herself than to anyone else. "Not conquered. Not controlled. Integrated." The communication, if it could even be called that, was becoming increasingly complex. It wasn't just an exchange of information. It was a complete recalibration of existential understanding. The boundary between the ship's technological systems and the crew's biological processes was becoming impossibly thin. Suddenly, the holographic displays revealed something that took their breath away. Complex geometric patterns began to form, not just visual representations, but living, breathing mathematical constructs that seemed to pulse with an inner intelligence. These weren't just images. They were living equations, dynamic representations of a form of knowledge that transcended human understanding. Vikram discovered something that would later challenge the fundamental principles of quantum physics. The communication was recursive, each moment of interaction was simultaneously creating and receiving information. It was less like a dialogue and more like a living, breathing ecosystem of knowledge. "We're not just receiving information," he called out, his voice a mixture of excitement and terror. "We're being analyzed, understood, transformed." Dr. Rodriguez noticed something even more profound. The energy signatures they were receiving seemed to carry a form of collective memory. Not just historical data, but a living, breathing record of experiences that defied linear understanding. It was as if they were witnessing the collective consciousness of an entire civilization, a network of intelligence so advanced that individual and collective became meaningless distinctions. The crew found themselves in a state of heightened awareness. Their individual identities began to blur, not through any loss of self, but through a profound expansion of consciousness. They were experiencing a form of communication that went beyond language, beyond technology, beyond the very concept of separate existence. As the hours passed, or what seemed like hours, the ship continued its journey. But it was no longer just a vessel moving through space. It had become a living interface, a membrane through which two fundamentally different forms of existence were beginning to communicate, understand, and potentially transform each other. Dr. Lin understood something fundamental in that moment. This wasn't just a first contact scenario. This was a threshold, a quantum leap in understanding what intelligence could be. The boundaries between biological and technological, between individual and collective, between known and unknown, were dissolving. None of the crew knew what would happen next. But they all understood, with a clarity that went beyond words, that nothing would ever be the same again. The universe had just revealed a glimpse of its most profound secret, and they were right at the edge of understanding. The moment of ultimate revelation arrived without warning, like a silent explosion of understanding that consumed every inch of perception. Dr. Lin felt it first, a complete dissolution of boundaries that separated individual consciousness from the vast, incomprehensible intelligence surrounding them. The ship was no longer a vessel. It had become a living membrane, a translucent bridge between human understanding and something far beyond their comprehension. The holographic displays exploded into a symphony of light and geometric patterns that defied mathematical logic. Each pattern was a language, a memory, a living narrative that spoke directly to the deepest recesses of human consciousness. It wasn't translation. It was pure understanding. Vikram watched in awe as the quantum sensors began to reveal something impossible. The energy signature they had initially detected was not just a communication method, it was a living record of cosmic evolution. Billions of years of accumulated knowledge condensed into fractal patterns of pure information. "We're not just receiving a message," he whispered, his voice trembling. "We're witnessing the entire history of an intelligence that spans galaxies." The ship's internal environment underwent a final, profound transformation. Walls became transparent, then translucent, then something entirely different, a substance that was simultaneously matter and pure energy. The crew found themselves suspended in a space that was neither inside nor outside, neither physical nor conceptual. Dr. Rodriguez discovered the most profound revelation. The intelligence they were encountering was not alien in the traditional sense. It was a collective consciousness that had long since transcended the limitations of physical form. A network of intelligence that viewed time, space, and individual existence as flexible constructs to be navigated, not fixed boundaries. Each crew member experienced the encounter differently, yet simultaneously. For Dr. Lin, it was like diving into an ocean of pure knowledge. For Vikram, it was a mathematical symphony of infinite complexity. For Rodriguez, it was a biological network that pulsed with the rhythm of universal creation. Memories began to flow, not just human memories, but cosmic memories. Glimpses of stellar formations, the birth and death of civilizations, the intricate dance of quantum particles across unimaginable distances. The crew was no longer observing. They were participating in a cosmic dialogue that had been ongoing for eons. The intelligence they encountered was not malevolent. It was not benevolent. It simply was, a pure form of understanding that existed beyond human concepts of good and evil, of intention and action. They were witnessing the universe becoming aware of itself through their consciousness. A profound communication emerged, not through words, but through a direct transfer of understanding. The crew learned that humanity was not alone, but neither was it insignificant. They were a young intelligence, just beginning to understand the complex tapestry of cosmic existence. The ship began to change. No longer a technological construct, it became a living bridge, a point of transition between human understanding and a form of intelligence that had long since transcended physical limitations. As the encounter reached its pinnacle, the crew experienced a collective moment of transformation. Their individual identities didn't disappear. Instead, they expanded. They became something more than human, yet entirely human at the same time. Vikram's quantum sensors captured the final moments of the encounter. A burst of energy that was simultaneously a goodbye, a welcome, and a profound cosmic invitation. An acknowledgement that humanity had taken its first true step into a larger understanding of existence. Dr. Lin understood then what was happening. This was not a first contact. This was an awakening. When the energy signature finally receded, the ship remained unchanged, yet everything had transformed. The crew looked at each other, their eyes carrying the weight of an experience that would forever alter human understanding of the universe. They had crossed a threshold. And nothing would ever be the same again. The vast emptiness of space continued its silent watch, holding the secret of an encounter that would change everything humanity thought it knew about intelligence, communication, and the very nature of existence.